Peace and love, everyone. Welcome to my channel. If you're new, please like and subscribe and share this video. I hope everyone out there is doing wonderful and you're surrounded by love, peace, and harmony this Wednesday evening in August, and just want to say welcome and peace to each and every one of you. Um, wow, the weather is really starting to change. Where I am here in the DMV, it's already starting to kind of shift into the fall season. And you all know from my previous videos that spring and summer are my favorite seasons, especially spring. But I find beauty in all of the seasons now and learn to enjoy things, aspects of each one. However, summer, I'm not ready for it to end. I'm not ready. I feel like I need some more beach days. I need some more time outside. I'm enjoying gardening and all fun summer activities. And so I'm just not ready for fall. But it's starting to feel kind of like it here. It's getting a little bit chillier and really quiet in the mornings. But with that said, I hope wherever you all are having a wonderful day, enjoying your summer. And tonight's topic is something that's kind of been heavy on my mind um, recently because of all the things that are happening, and it's been making me wonder, And tonight's topic is, are we living in the fall of Atlantis or Lemuria? Um, and we have many of us have heard stories about these ancient civilizations that were that once existed, and we can talk about that whether it's myth or fact, but they were mighty, very well known, admired places, and then something catastrophic happened. Major cataclysms took place, and then they um, vanished, and in some people's minds, lost in the sands of time, as they say. So, we're going to be talking about that and exploring that tonight, and also exploring were these places that fell or were destroyed, are they actual facts? Are they myth and legend? Um, is it a parable, perhaps? You know, and what that means to us, and how we can learn from these stories, if they are in fact stories and not warnings. So let's begin. And um you know there's a phenomenon of many ancient stories, legends, and prophecies about civilizations that rose. um they were at the height of their apex, and then they fell for one reason or another. you know um it could be for many different reasons. It could be, uh cataclysms, famine, uh, war, pestilence, or whatever, or just corruption. And many of these civilizations left their mark on the world in stone monuments for future generations to see. So you can see the splendors of some of the ancient civilizations, and the level of technology that they had, and the level of building expertise that they had, because many of the ancient stone monuments, you know, they may be in ruins around the world, but they're still standing, which is a speaks volumes to the level of engineering that they had, the level of expertise that they had, and what they had available to build things around them. Um, if you've ever been to a city or a archaeological site, or a city where there are some ancient ruins or ancient structures, and if you've seen that, it's a sight to see, and it's magnificent, and it's very humbling in a way, because you see the technology that the ancestors had, and just knowing that they left a piece of their world behind for us to see. I felt like that when I went to a cliff dwelling in the Southwest. And I also felt like that when I went to ancient Kemet in Nubia. Um, I've been to North Africa once, and then I've also felt like that when I've been to some of the mounds and some other places here in the States, and you see these ancient these ancient sites that many are in ruins now, for one reason or another, and it's just magnificent to see that this is something that people built and it lasted this long. If you look at some of the properties you see now and how quickly things begin to deteriorate and fall apart, but the ancestors built things out of stone that lasted for centuries. And that is amazing to see. It's amazing to see, and it's quite remarkable, in fact. Also the stonework, like not the stonework, the pottery shards, sometimes the whole pottery intact that lasted, centuries. You may find, arrowheads and things, whatever the artifacts are, you see the skill and the precision that was put into it. And it actually reminds you that, people have so much to give and to offer when it comes to what we can build and what we create when we put our creative mind and endeavors into something. And the ancestors built these things, and like I said, it stands the test of time, and it still exists to this day. And so it's really like a part of them, I think, that they left behind for us to see. So it's really interesting to me. Um and then there are some civilizations that were lost, as they say, in the sands of time and hence forgotten. There are many that people don't even know in the modern world, don't know the names of. When they discover them, they ask people around them, well, who built this civilization, or we found this city, buried under jungle vines or under the desert or underwater, whatever. And they have to discover who it was that built it and why and what happened to it. And it's just some stuff has been forgotten, or it's just so old maybe that no one can determine or decipher or decode the writings or the glyphs or whatever. And so they say little is known about these ancient people and these ancient civilization. And some civilizations were deliberately hidden and kept a secret. Yes, they were. And yes, they have been. um, I've even seen documentaries about that, about them discovering places and discovering things in remote areas, and sometimes not so remote, sometimes right hidden in plain sight, right next to where people live. And because of whatever reason, it'll be kept a secret. We may have heard about ancient civilizations that were destroyed, abandoned during wars or cataclysms. In recent years, they've been finding underground cities in some places that appear to be populated by many people at some point in time in the history, or just always there's new discoveries. I know I saw on my email news feed one day that a river bank dried up somewhere in Europe. I believe it was in Spain, and it revealed a lost, city or something that, no one knew existed until the waters levels of a certain river receded. And then I hear lots of stories about that. Like sometime when river levels or lake levels are low, it will reveal things that people forgot about or just were not aware of. And sometimes when things change course, um, or they, build dams or whatever is happening, it will reveal things. When they're building and doing construction, they'll find out and they'll discover grave sites or burial mounds, or different types of pyramids or structures or temples or whatever they find. um, and this is everywhere, because all of the modern world is built on top of, nearly all of it is built on top of an older civilization. These cities that we ride around in, a lot of them have ancient origins. Many of the cities do. And the cities that a lot of these cities we live in have been renamed in the modern world, in the modern era. Whether you know about the a reset or not, but a lot of these cities that in towns and states and countries that we live in, the names that we have today are not the names that people had a few hundred or a few thousand years ago. So it's a lot of new construction on top of older construction, new cities, and municipalities built on top of older ones. But how come little is known about these older places? Um, in the public, not a lot of times the public and the general public, that is, don't know much about the older civilizations or the older cities and towns or whatever that are right under our feet, or the older names. And why were the names changed? Why were cities built in the way that they were on top of older structures? Why weren't they preserved? Why weren't they made, um why weren't they preserved and recognized as archaeological sites or ancient sites? But a lot of times it depends, the different situations. But many of these civilizations were destroyed or abandoned because of something that happened, whether it was a war or cataclysms, whether natural cataclysms or man made, it doesn't matter, but something happened. And we see all around the world, whenever they discover something, it's always buried under tons of dirt, buried under river banks, buried under sand, buried under the ocean, whatever. So that right there says to me that there's something major happened on this planet at some point in time in the distant past, and changed the surface of the earth. Either things, there was, major flooding, earthquakes, or something. Because when they find things, a lot of times it's buried under something. So what happened to bury all these things? Why are so many things being found underwater or under tons of dirt? When they start digging and doing construction work, they are discovering things, or building homes, or people are, digging or looking for things. Trees fall over and they reveal something under it. All of that, something happened. And so we can't deny that fact. We can't deny that something happened, but what happened, when, and why? So one such civilization was Atlantis, or Atlan. Some people deny its existence and say it was legendary. But was it? There's stories of it. There's stories across different cultures that talk about this ancient utopian like civilization, where that was very advanced, and it was beautiful. The people there were beautiful and they were noble, etc. Mighty rulers there, and then something happened. There's stories across cultures of the destruction of this great place once upon a time, and other civilizations destructions due to greed, wickedness, and abuse of technology. All of these stories are prevalent in many cultures. Some of these stories may be literal, or are they speaking about a future time period? That is what's been weighing on my mind heavy. Were they speaking of a future time, or does history repeat itself? We look throughout the earth, and there's signs and warnings and prophecies across different cultures around the world. I've talked to people from different indigenous cultures, and they all have similar stories about a great destruction in the past and a great destruction coming in the future. Whether they, a new world, or coming from the ashes of an older world, if you will, or just going into a reset or a different time period. And with the change into the new time period or the new world, the old one has to come to an end, whether you look at that as a good thing, a positive thing, or as something being destructive. Um, Many of these stories, some people will say, don't take them literal, they're parables. But are they? Are they parables? Because as we look throughout the earth and the archaeology, you see that something major happened at some point in time in these ancient civilizations. For example, there was one found in the ruins of a series of cities, was found in what is present day, like Pakistan, Northwest India, and I cannot remember the name of the city right. Well, all of the cities right now. I think the civilization might have been called. Well, it was the Indus Valley civilization. I'll say that because I can't remember the name of the cities, but they found evidence that this was a big thriving series of cities, civilization, very advanced. They had a lot of advanced technology. They had plumbing systems. I mean, it was so many things. And based on the reconstruction photographs I've seen, the place looked amazing. And something catastrophic happened because they found high levels of radiation in the area, some other evidence of catastrophe because of the way many of the bodies were found, like the people were fleeing and something happened and they didn't make it out. um, Lots of evidence of all kinds of things throughout the planet that point to some catastrophic event that happened. um, and I'm asking, and just something to put on our minds to think about, um, is something catastrophic happening now? Like, is history repeating itself, or are those stories that we've heard about ancient technologically advanced society that was destroyed because it destroyed itself because of greed and corruption, etc.? Are those warnings of a future time being now, like the ancient future is now? So just consider all the stories that we've heard. Are they talking about a previous time period? Are they talking about now? Or is this something that happens frequently over the course of different cycles? Like time, we know time is cyclical. So are these, you know, destructions or these major changes? Is this something that just naturally keeps happening and repeating itself? Are we living in the fall of a civilization now? You know, the stories and the parables or prophecies or whatever you want to call them, or whatever you believe they are they warnings of the time to come? So starting with Atlantis, because that is the most widely known um ancient, myth civilization, we should say. And many people believe it's a myth or a legend, or it's just a parable, it's not a real place. However, there are, if you investigate, lots of evidence that it was in fact a place at once upon a time. There are old maps with that have Atlantis or Atlant on it, and there are places named after it, like the Atlantic Ocean, for instance, and many other things. So Plato, the great philosopher, learned about it from his ancestor, according to the story. And this is like one of the major sources of information about Atlantis. He heard about, and his ancestor heard about it from an Egyptian priest who told him about a previous civilization that they were, I guess, a colony of. And this civilization was so great and so advanced. However, it, was destroyed in a series of cataclysms. And it was filled with splendor, very detailed descriptions of it. It had a mighty army or navy, and it was once a utopian governed by a utopia excuse me, governed by moral people and mighty people. But its inhabitants lost their way to greediness, began experimenting and breaking natural laws and things, and became extremely wicked. And the place is no more. We also have read, if you are a person who studies scriptures, the scriptures, both Bible, Quran, and some other books, they mentioned lots of places that were once strong, mighty, had powerful rulers, had everything you could imagine, that people would want. And then they were destroyed because of their wickedness, their refusal to repent. Some of their evil deeds were just out of control, and so they somewhat imploded, if you will, or destroyed themselves. Or if some of the stories, the people were destroyed because of by God, because of their evilness and their refusal to repent, and the things that they were doing to harm each other. And all these stories, have a great moral message in them. Whether, you believe these are real, actual events, or if you believe that, it's just parables or legends, but they all have a moral, to these stories. And that is, people became filled with greed and pride, and cared more about things and acquiring things than they did about people and one another, or serving, God, if you will. And because they strayed away from um, the loving guidance and caring for one another and caring for the planet, they became something different, and then the destruction came. um and the stories are everywhere throughout different cultures about this type of phenomenon. And then there was ancient Lemuria, um which is, there are some sources of information about it, and you have to do your own research. And Lemuria was also another ancient civilization. From what I've read, was ancient global civilization. And it also went through a series of cataclysms. And um most of it is in ruins or no longer exists. And there's a few places that are remnants of it. But and allegedly it was in the Pacific or the Far East. And there are ruins that have been found in different places, off the coast of islands, or on islands, ruins in many different places that are allegedly a part of that ancient civilization. And it was a place that was also considered a utopian society, had everything that the people could ever want and ask for. Um, and something went terribly wrong. Now, whether you believe these places existed or not, we do know that there were ancient civilizations and ancient cities, and we're constantly finding ancient ruins of civilizations everywhere. And somebody built them, and so who were these people? What happened to them? Did they have time to prepare for these cataclysmic events, whether it was natural or man-made? Did they have time to prepare? How did they get out? Did they get out? Are we the descendants of the survivors, or were they all destroyed and we just have this like faint collective memory of what happened? There are signs all around us that if we don't change, there's going to be some major trouble on our planet. For example, when it comes to planetary survival, we there's in the recent years there's been a lot of talk about um global warming and climate change. And years ago, I know when I was growing up, there was very little talk about it. People didn't do a lot of recycling. People didn't seem to care very much about the harmful things that greenhouse gases and things that they were putting into the atmosphere. And it just seemed like people didn't focus very much on the planet per se, as much as there's a lot of talk and effort in changing and mitigating some harmful practices now. Like now, everywhere a lot of places you go, you see lots of recycling cans next to trash cans. You see, where I live, they even had a campaign to clean up plastic bag usage. And so plastic bags are discouraged and banned in some places. Even plastic straws, things need to be compostable, and things need to be re reusable. So they've returned to paper bags. I know, I remember one time, you went grocery shopping, everything was, they used to give you a choice. You want paper or plastic. And then as time went by, they stopped having paper. It was all plastic. And now we're going back to paper or reusable bags. And then, the whole movement towards doing something different to clean up the environment and to mitigate the harmful effects of the climate changes that are happening. That is, I would say, is building momentum. And that movement has been around for a while, but it's getting stronger and more popular as the years go by, because the harmful effects um from the toxins put in the air, in the water, and the soil, it seems to be getting a lot worse. And so, there's many climate and environmental summits and symposiums and conferences where people are exploring different ways to resolve these issues and mitigate these issues, because if they don't, we're going to have a real serious planet crisis. And this is something that has been warned for decades, and some things have been done, but we still have a long way to go when it comes to eradicating the pollution and the harm that has been done for a long period of time. And so now we're in the effects of the choices and the decisions that people made decades ago, which had a detrimental effect. And now we're trying to clean it up and fix it and resolve it. But if we don't, it's going to have a greater impact and a more harmful impact to future generations. So this is what we're faced with now, and this is why I'm thinking are the warnings from those stories, if you believe they're stories or parables or actual facts, that civilization, a great civilization that was technologically advanced, but because of it lost its way, it began to it became destroyed, whether it was a natural cataclysm or man-made. So I really feel like we are in the throes of that now, and if we don't come up with some solutions, some healthy solutions to fix the problem, we're going to be facing another such this, cataclysm. And the climate one is a major one. I do a lot of work around climate justice and environmental justice and some other justices, and we are really um, facing some serious issues. There's much to be done. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of change happening, but it's so much that needs to be addressed that I don't believe that time is running out per se, but I feel like we could, if we come up as communities, if we come together and do more to mitigate these issues, I think we could slow down, if not end the climate crisis that the planet is facing. So that is just one of many signs that something needs to change, and just all the things that's happening on our planet now like never before. Like the weather is different. Um, Climate is different everywhere. The planet is really beginning is warming up. There's major changes that are taking place, major geographic changes, as well as changes in the atmosphere. um, Weather conditions are different, and all of this is having an impact on um, the flora and the fauna on the planet, as well as the people. We're all having to change our lifestyles and adapt to these major changes that are taking place. So it's like the earth is also warning us. And in addition to the stories from the past, we're also getting warnings that we have to change the way that we handle the planet, the way that we handle nature, the way we handle each other, and the way we handle all that is in our environments. Because it's all interconnected, it's all intertwined, and so what affects one affects the other. Another reason we need to take this seriously is, the ancestors warned us. If you are a person who um, follows the guidance or the teachings from whatever ancestral group that, whoever your ancestors are, there was much said about the future and people straying away and losing their way, not knowing who they are, not knowing who their ancestors were, not keeping those traditions, and not honoring each other, not honoring the earth. All of this is something that was warned about and talked about, and um, many people are feeling called to go back to the ways of the old ones, and to practice some of the older teachings and practices. Many people have revived a lot of things that a few generations ago would have been considered a taboo subject or outdated, or just not worthy of passing down to generations. And there's been a revival of a lot of the ancestral ways and a lot of the ancestral teachings and practices and customs and folk ways and everything that was suppressed for a very long time. Many things were lost and suppressed through through the advent of colonization and displacement. but a lot of people are returning to some of their ancestral wisdom and ancestral knowledge. And part of that is warnings um, from our ancestors, warnings on how to treat one another, how to treat the planet, how to be caretakers of the earth again, and to treat the planet like it's a living being and to honor it, and not to treat it like, or, and especially not to treat one another like we're expendable or disposable. You know, we've been in an age of great spiritual darkness for a long time. And as we come out of that, this is a time where we need to be aware of and acknowledging that, you know, the ancestors were very wise and they had a lot to teach us, and a lot that we should be paying attention to and acknowledging and striving to live up to their expectations, I think. Um, Also, another phenomenon that is not widely known, but a lot of our history, our ancestors wrote in advance. And so, a lot of the things that we're hearing about and we're seeing and experiencing, this has been predicted, and it has been, you know, it has been warned about for many generations and many centuries. And people, a lot of times, don't take heed to warnings and don't pay attention to them and just don't give it any kind of acknowledgement. But we want to pay attention to warnings. I think we definitely want to pay attention to warnings and um, stay aware, not to be afraid, not to be filled with fear, but to be aware of what the warnings are and why. Like, what's the message in it? You know, is it something that's, you know, usually a warning is something that is bringing your awareness to something, like warning you not to do something, or this going to have this kind of outcome. It's not, you know, it shouldn't be fear based. It should be, what can you do different? How can you make a situation better? So a warning sign is letting you know, like, you know, you see a sign that's telling you not to enter certain areas, danger. So, you know, you've been warned. That's why it's a warning not to enter that area. Because if you do, there's going to be some consequences. And you have a choice. You cannot enter it and go another way, or you can just not take heed to the warning and keep going. And then whatever happens on the other side of that warning sign, you know, that's it's on you because you got the warning. So we need to take heed to the guidance that comes from, especially the ancestors and others, and really take things seriously, especially what's happening now. And if you notice, all over the planet in the last, I would say, I think it's probably started in the 90s, out before 2000, there's been a great number of political upheavals all over the place. I mean, people challenging their governments that have been in power for decades, and you know, people have been doing things a certain way, whether they were satisfied with it or not. But the newer generation and in the newer time period that we're in, people are challenging that like never before. You know, governments are being toppled, especially tyrannical ones. People are fighting wars, you know, claiming and declaring their independence from certain types of rulership, rulership that was tolerated in the past, but the newer generation and this time period that we're in is not supporting that type of rulership and that type of leadership. You know, we're no longer in that time of great spiritual darkness where people seize power and just became rulers because they used wrongfully taken positions of power, conferred titles. They were tyrannical and abusive in a lot of their ways when it came to rulership. And in a lot of people's mind, leadership was something that was very controlling. Power is seized through, violence and intimidation. And real leaders are chosen by the people, for the people. They serve the people. You're not a king or a queen or a president or what, a ruler or whatever, and you positions yourself in a certain place, and you just give orders, but you haven't really earned the right to be a ruler or a leader. Because in the past, and in a healthy society, you know the people choose the leader from amongst them as someone that represents them, that supports them, that serves them. You're chosen because of the deeds that you do. You don't just choose yourself and become a leader, or chosen because you clawed your way to the top, and you stepped on and assassinated all your opponents and all those who oppose you, so that's why you elite. No, that's not leadership. That's actually abuse of power. But for many centuries and generations, that's what a lot of people had. Leaders who were leaders for their entire lifetime. Like, they didn't even allow anyone else to have an election or to win, or to oppose them, or to rule with them. It was like their way or the highway. And if you don't like it, you can leave the country, or you go into jail if you protest, or being assassinated or whatever. And now we're in a time where people want more freedom of choice. They want shared leadership. They want leaders who actually lead by example, leaders who are boots on the ground, involved with people on grassroots level, um, actually represent the needs of the people, connect with the people, that they say that they're representing and serving. And which I think is, the time period that we're in. This is the time period now where that type of leadership and that type of thinking is supported. And so what you're seeing around the planet, with all the political uprisings and ousting of leaders in some other countries, and major changes. I mean, things that are going on in some countries now are major compared to what our parents and grandparents and great grandparents lived under. And the change is coming, and the change is here, and the change is coming because of the period of time that we're living in now. In the new earth, people are no longer willing to tolerate, excuse me, and live in such a manner that doesn't fulfill them, and doesn't speak to our hearts. The old leadership and the old way that I just mentioned. This is not the kind of true leadership that people want anymore. And um, people don't want to live under fear and the threats of violence, and not having their freedom, and having their freedoms taken from them. And they're speaking out more, and fighting and standing up more for themselves. And this is why you're seeing a lot of wars, and, as my grandma used to say, rumors of wars. You're seeing a lot of wars and a lot of upheaval, and a lot of government political unrest in a lot of countries, because there's this change going on, these opposing forces that's taking place. And yes, there's always been wars. Yes, there's always been conflicts. However, the time that we're in now is like post the old mindset when it took over, And that old paradigm shift, um, we're at the end of that, or the apex of that now, where people are no longer willing to live under imperial rule, and it had to come to an end. Anything that's not based on truth and justice has to come to an end, and it's coming to an end. And some people, are making it come to an end faster, and so that's what you're seeing. So with that said, all things are being revealed right now. Things are being exposed like never before. A lot of things that people did in the dark, or were always kept clandestine or secretive, is not so secretive anymore, and is being exposed rapidly. Part of that, I think, is in part is due to um the inventions of social media. News travels a lot faster than it used to. And, thanks to the help of the internet as well, making things travel faster, and just, news is more accessible to the community and communities at large. And with that wealth of information and the access that we have to information, things are being exposed, things are being revealed, things that have been kept hidden and secret for very long are no longer hidden and secret. And people are just more aware of things, and eager to learn more, eager to find out more. Um, People are not is so much afraid of asking questions. In the past, we're no longer in that period of the don't ask, don't tell era. Is more of, people want to know more, and want to share more information and get information out there. So that is what we are faced with. And with that knowledge comes, a sense of responsibility. Like, are we going to be like those forgotten civilizations in the past? Are we going to be lost to the sands of time? Are we going to succumb to our own vices? Are we going to destroy one another? Are we going to destroy our beautiful planet? Are we going to learn from the mistakes of the past and fix them? And I really think it's not too late. I think that with all things, just like I said earlier with the warning phenomenon, a warning is just that. It's not meant to frighten you, it's just to make you aware that you can try this, or you can try something else. And the warning is kind of making you aware that you have a critical choice to make, a very serious choice, and that the choice that you make determines what kind of outcome. And with everything in life, the choices that you make determine not only your future, but your destiny in many ways. So we must choose wisely. All of us, we must make better choices, better decisions, um, be more proactive in making people that you say represent you in government or your faith or whatever, make sure that they are in fact representing and serving your needs, and what they, keeping them accountable and holding them to what they say that they are going to do. And we all need to do better when it comes to that, and just focus on looking at what happened in the past, and are we going to allow history to repeat itself, or are we going to change and have a different outcome? It's not too late, I think. So remember, family, we have inherited a lot of toxic conditioning and circumstances from the past. And remember always to go easy on yourself. Remember, you are clearing thousands of years of outdated conditioning as we learn to do things a better way, a wiser way, and to be more loving to one another on this planet. So, with that said, I end today's broadcast. To each and every one of you, love, peace, prosperity, good health, and freedom to you all. Peace and love.